Welcome, Monica, to episode 15 of the podcast. For those tuning in, today we have Monica Wadwa, who's a relationship and feminine embodiment coach. She's also the author of her book, Queen Treatment. So, maybe we can start by introducing yourself a little bit, how you got into the field, and what is it that you do exactly, who do you work with, so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you so much for having me here.
You're welcome.
I put myself on social media as relationship coach just because it's easier for people to understand. But I guess if I'm to really describe the work that I do, I would describe it as relationship readiness coaching. So I coach typically women to help them to heal or, reprogram their limiting beliefs or things like that so that they stop attracting and being attracted to unhealthy partnership. And then the feminine embodiment piece is because I feel like a lot of women are very disconnected from their feminine energy. But the way to get more women to embrace more of their feminine energy is not so much to intellectualize it in the mind, but to get into the body. So that's essentially what, when you get more in touch with your feminine energy, you're getting more in touch with your internal world, essentially. That's the work that I do mainly with women, but I do work with men sometimes. But I mainly work with women.
And this is different than being, say, like a therapist or psychologist.
Yeah, there's certain types of therapy that I do think are amazing. But talk therapy, for instance, I've never really seen it have a huge effect on me, at least. And so that's what I loved about the coaching element is that we do go into your past and, we go into the body to find the answers and things like that. And that is an element of talk therapy involved to get some guidance with it. But then, once we've gone to the past and looked at those past wounds, then we take the practical steps forward, which is the part that I really love about coaching as opposed to therapy, is that it involves those practical steps forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important that I think that you mentioned this because nowadays on social media, you look at all the talk about healing and different healing modalities, and it always comes up, is talk therapy enough? Is it not enough? What's the difference between, intellectualizing your past or your trauma, like you said, or actually getting into the body and, healing what may need to be healed somatically as well.
Yes, yeah.
And I think it's important because there's this huge debate online. Like you said, now talk therapy wasn't great for you, right? But for some people, it can be fantastic.
Exactly.
It depends on the person.
Exactly.
So I think it's important, and you can let me know what your thoughts are on this, to sort of like choose what modality works best for you.
Yes. Very true.
Right?
Yeah, I think for me specifically, because I work a lot of the time with very high achieving women, they are very good at intellectualizing things and remaining in the mind, which is why I feel so passionate with my clients to get them into the body, because I find, especially when people are very used to intellectualizing things like high achieving people are, then they can get very good at keeping themselves safe in that sort of comfort zone of, they might understand the trauma and they might have recognized where it was from. But if you don't get into the body and actually do that deeper healing work, because the thing is, in terms of our thoughts, it's like 5% of those thoughts are actually conscious beliefs, whereas the other 95% are subconscious. And that's the part that's actually running the show for you essentially. And so, for me, getting into the body helps to tap into that 95% of the subconscious beliefs.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I totally agree. There's some people who I have had, one of my therapists in the past, that was slightly more talk therapy, but involving some breathwork exercises as well. And she was fantastic. I guess it's just, before you go down this path of any kind of healing, really, really do your research into the person who you're doing the work with. And that doesn't mean that they have to be this perfectly healed individual, but I do recommend that they've, maybe experienced the type of pain that you've experienced, that you're experiencing now, and they've experienced it in the past. Or, get a vibe from them, like actually meet with them first and talk with them first so that you can, get a sense of, are they doing this just for the paycheck, or are they doing this because they genuinely really, really care about this work?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And touching on the point that you said that many people stay, sort of stuck in the mind. I was exactly like that. So I used to intellectualize everything. You know, I came from a little bit of a traditional upbringing, and also I was very scientific in the sense that I was all into like my maths and my sciences back in school. So everything I did was up there.
Yeah.
And then, and then also like when people go through trauma, when it's too difficult to deal with, they sort of like escape into the mind, right?
Yeah.
Because the body's not safe to feel just yet, right? So everybody finds a safe space up in there.
Yeah.
And so everything essentially becomes so dissociated from your body that you're just absolutely 100% of the time living up there.
Yeah.
And you sort of like, I found, Monica, that you sort of like live there until it's finally safe to come back into the body. So I was on like survival mode, fight or flight, running around, coping with different things, right? Excess, maybe drinking or caffeinating or whatever the case may be, because it wasn't safe to come down to the body yet, right? And then as soon as I started doing that work, I realized that, I actually need to come, like you said, come back into the body.
Yeah.
And there's where the deep, long-lasting, true changes and healing happen. And then you feel it. It's no longer like, I understand my patterns, which is very important. Especially like, for example, for me, I had to learn all about like narcissism and things like that. So for that, you need the actual education on that, right? You need the cognitive understanding of what it is and where it comes from and how to deal with it, so on and so forth. So there's where I think, for example, talk therapy can be beneficial.
Yeah.
Because you're intellectualizing certain cognitive aspects of it.
Yes.
But then to actually then go in and heal, you need to see what that's done to your body and your nervous system.
100%.
Yeah.
And you just named something also brilliant that, it very much depends on what's going on for you as well, because I agree when it comes to something like narcissistic personality disorder, it's very healing to understand it.
Very validating as well.
So validating, exactly. And so for something like that, I would recommend to, do your research into understanding, and not just the problem I think with narcissism these days is that narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder have become the same term, but it's actually, people think that narcissistic tendencies is the same as narcissism in terms of narcissistic personality disorder, and it's very, very different. Someone with narcissistic personality disorder, they might have narcissistic tendencies, but, we all have narcissistic tendencies to an extent.
Exactly.
But narcissistic personality disorder is a very different thing.
Exactly.
So understanding that rather than just narcissistic tendencies really, really helps with that process.
And I think it's great that you mentioned that because like you said, many people can have narcissistic tendencies, including you and I, but that's very different than the actual full-blown disorder, right?
Yes.
Which is characterized by, pretty much complete lack of empathy, lots of manipulation, lots of gaslighting, twisting of reality, triangulation with others, smear campaigning. Those are actually all, like everybody that has NPD or narcissistic personality disorder will share those exact same common traits. I've seen it. When I first learned about it, Monica, I was shocked to see that this is an actual thing. Yeah. And then I started to be able to, pinpoint who actually might have something, who might have it actually. Yes. It was so crazy.
Yes, exactly. And actually, so this is something I'd really love to address as well, because I hear a lot of actually relationship coaches saying how the term narcissism is overused. And I understand where they're coming from with it because of what we just addressed. That I think it's a little bit misunderstood in terms of narcissistic tendencies.
Yes.
But something that I guess I just want to address is like, I think as relationship coaches, more than ever that in those situations when someone comes to you with as a victim of that type of abuse, they've had so much of, months, years, a very long period of time where they've essentially had their voice, they've had their voice diluted, told them that what they were thinking wasn't true. And so that's part of the abuse that they've had to endure. Absolutely. And so then for anyone that has suffered from that, to then hear people saying online that, people throw it around too much and, you're probably not right when you say that, it's painful to those victims. So I just want to address that, I do think it's a little bit misunderstood, but I would never claim online that that people are misusing it, because you don't know who is
Correct.
actually
Who's been through it,
misusing
yeah.
it and who's actually been through it, and that could be
Absolutely.
very destructive for them to hear
Correct.
that type of response coming from someone like a relationship coach as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. And it's interesting because with narcissistic abuse, it's, if you don't know about it, it's almost like impossible to describe to someone that hasn't actually
So
been through it,
true,
right?
so
Because,
true.
you know, you can describe physical abuse, you can describe emotional abuse, even, for example, sexual abuse. You can understand what that sort of is, right?
Yeah.
Even if you haven't been through it.
Yeah.
But with this, it, like, to the average person, they'd be like, oh, like, I don't really get what it is, right?
Exactly.
So unless you've really been through it, through all the manipulation, through all the gaslighting,
Yeah.
you know, the people calling you crazy and this and that, unless you really go through it, it's
Yeah.
almost impossible to understand to the average person.
Yes.
So like you said,
So
it can be
true.
so demotivating for someone that's been through it to have it like brushed aside by others.
Exactly,
Yeah, for sure.
exactly. Yeah. And honestly, when someone has just come out of a relationship like that, or just worked out what was going on and separated themselves from the situation,
Yeah.
whether it's a parent figure, a partner, a friend, a colleague, you can almost see in the way that they talk about it, you can see the difference between if someone's just like, oh my God, they're so narcissistic.
Oh, yeah,
As
absolutely.
opposed to if you've experienced that type of
destroyed.
abuse, yeah, they are just a shell of themselves. And so you
Absolutely.
can tell the difference between
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great
someone
point,
who's
actually.
a natural victim of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It just disrupts your whole, you know, sense of self, your
Exactly.
confidence, your well-being, your nervous system is wrecked
Yeah.
essentially.
It's a big healing process.
Yeah, it is. It's massive.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'd know firsthand. But yeah, so I mean, the next point I guess I wanted to touch on is the importance of sort of like healing your trauma, doing some inner child work before hoping to, you know, sort of get into a successful relationship. Because, you know, we're not really taught what it takes to actually be in a healthy, successful relationship, right? We look at the movies, two people meet, love at first sight,
Yeah.
fairy tale, you know, living happily ever after. And then we assume that that's how it actually is, right?
Exactly.
Not knowing that there's two sort of wounded people coming into a relationship, especially if they've never done any sort of like work, and then they're expecting their partner to essentially be, you know, the parent or parents that they have the most wounds from, and they replicate that dynamic, and it's just
Exactly.
one big mess
Yes.
sometimes, right? So yeah, maybe if you can touch on that.
Yes, yeah, it's actually that's a big part of my book, is how, you know, we grow up with these fairy tales and these narratives of how, you know, from the movies of how
Yeah.
love should be, that
Yeah.
you just catch eyes across
Yeah,
the
love
room,
at
and then
first
it's all
sight.
rainbows and butterflies, and then the
Exactly.
rest of your life you just sail off into the sunset.
Yeah.
And in reality, you know, love is not like that. And
Yeah.
that within my own journey, that's kind of what happened for me, that I had this realization of like, okay, I feel like I'm the common denominator in these unhealthy relationship patterns. But there was a period of time, and the most frustrating period of time was when I couldn't work out how to change that, because I could see what had been going wrong.
Yeah.
But because we're so ill-informed about relationships, and I
Correct.
just thought, well, I'm just the victim of circumstance in these situations.
Correct.
I can't. But then when I had the realization that, wait, I'm the common denominator in all this, so maybe I have a little bit more power and responsibility over these circumstances than I've been made to believe, or
Yeah.
that I've allowed myself to believe.
Right.
So yeah, it was a big journey for me to work that stuff out, because of the fact that it basically involved a lot of rewiring. And even, you know, if you look at Disney, for instance, and again, that's part of my book, is this concept of the whole princess treatment thing,
Yeah,
when actually in
yeah.
reality, the princesses, they were the ones that were locked up in the tower waiting for this love outside of themselves to come and save them. How disempowering for a woman to learn that that's what love is about, that you just wait for this magical man to come
Prince
and choose
Charming.
you. Yeah, Prince Charming as well. You know, talk about narcissism,
Yeah.
like Prince Charming to
Yeah.
a T, you know? They make themselves like these, you know, they love bomb, they
Yeah.
become obsessed, they come, you know, it's all
Yeah.
actually very, like a lot of the narratives are very toxic, and we think,
Absolutely.
okay, it's just fairy tales, it's just Disney. But in reality, as we were talking about before, though, that 95% of those subconscious beliefs are formed in those first years when you're watching the things like Disney and reading
Absolutely.
the things like fairy tales, and you believe everything to be truth because your prefrontal cortex hasn't developed yet to really have that like critical thinking element.
Right.
So you do believe that your Prince
Absolutely.
Charming should come down from the tower that you've locked yourself up in, like, and come and save you from
Yeah,
there, you
yeah.
know, like that's the that's what we subconsciously believe. So sorry, wait, what was the question? I went off on a bit of a tangent.
Like, how people view, relationships as, going to be easy breezy, fairy tales, as opposed to in reality, if you want to have a successful relationship or marriage or long-term partnership, it needs a lot of inner work on both sides.
Yes.
A lot of, open, honest communication.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, 100%. And that's why I do the work that I do. And that's why I describe it as relationship readiness coaching, because, yes, you can get very lucky and end up in a very healthy, beautiful relationship without having done any inner work.
Yeah.
But not everyone has had this like perfect fairy tale childhood where, they don't have any past wounds. And the majority of people actually do have past wounds, even if they, a lot of people don't think,
exactly. I didn't even know about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Most people don't. But that's why I think the beauty of relationships is because the relationship that you have in your adult relationships is actually very similar to the types of relationships that you had with your parent figures.
Of course.
Then relationships essentially will trigger some of your deepest wounds. But the beauty of that is that I think that can then trigger the deepest healing at the end of the day, because if you allow yourself to address that, rather than just go for escapism or just point the finger at the other person.
Absolutely.
And so, I always say that my mission is to help other people form healthy, loving relationships with others through first forming a healthy, loving relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
Because it's not to say you have to be 100% healed to get into a healthy relationship. But if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, if you don't love yourself, if you don't know your worth, if you're not attuned to yourself at all, your needs, you can't self-regulate, all those sorts of things, then unfortunately you will keep repeating the same destructive relationship patterns over and over again until you do heal those past wounds. Because one of the things that I say is that your past picks your partner. And so those past wounds, your relationship that you had with your parent figures, the social conditioning that you received in your childhood, the limiting beliefs that you received then, all of that sort of stuff is essentially what is picking your partner today. And if that stuff wasn't healthy, and that's the relationship that you still have with yourself, is holding on to those limiting beliefs and that past conditioning, et cetera, then that's unfortunately it's going to pick unhealthy partners for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was beautifully said. And it's so true, right? It's funny because like when we get into a relationship, Monica, like you said, it triggers sort of your deepest, oldest childhood wounds that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like relationships are essentially mirrors into each other's shadow side, essentially. Right. So even if you're not aware that you have wounds or healing that needs to be, worked on or done, a relationship sometimes will often open that sort of Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Say, hey, look at all this that you've been suppressing. Yeah, absolutely. And literally, Monica, that's what happened to me in the past. I'd look at my past relationships and I'd realize I'd always repeat the same patterns subconsciously, mind you. This was never conscious. I'd always like to think as myself as, being a little bit, say intellectual, but that has nothing to do with actually doing the deep inner healing work, right?
Exactly.
And like you said, if you haven't done that, then those patterns will repeat.
Yeah.
On a psychological level, and even, I don't know if you're into spirituality at all, but even on a karmic level, they call it like a wheel of karma, essentially. So it keeps on repeating until you sort of get the, the message or the learning or the lesson from it, apply it, and then things will start to shift.
Yes.
In your romantic relationships, personal relationships, and every sort of relationship.
It affects every area, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, with the work that I do with women, it's to do with your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And then that, of course, affects your relationships too. But if you have a healthy relationship with yourself, then you operate in life differently. You hold yourself differently, all of these kind of things. But, also another thing to address with this is that even if, because some people might be listening to this and thinking, well, my relationships have been all so different, so that's not the case for me.
Yep.
But when I was reflecting on my relationships, for instance, like my first two relationships were actually very, very healthy, and they were incredible men. So the in terms of the partners that I picked, it was good. But it was my relationship with myself in terms of my own insecurities, like which continued then, and then it just manifested in different ways in relationships. But I was so deeply insecure when I was younger, and so some of the behaviors that I would do were unhealthy. This is what I talk about with the princess treatment, when you're dating from your princess energy as opposed to your queen energy. Like princesses, they are so insecure and they need attention and validation from everyone because they don't believe themselves to be enough as they are.
Yep.
And so, yeah, in relationships, like nowadays, I don't need attention from loads of different people. But when I was, 16, I never like cheated or anything, but I wanted attention from lots of different men to make myself feel validated. And so even though I picked a good partner at that stage, I still had unhealthy relationship patterns. And so I probably pushed that relationship away because of my own behaviors. And so it can manifest in so many different ways. But so for me, it was essentially that, what I had to learn for myself was what is actual unconditional self-love for me, because I loved myself so much based on all these conditions, which is what made me feel so deeply insecure. Because if you don't truly love yourself, then there is no amount of attention, no amount of compliments, no amount of anything that's actually ever going to make you feel enough.
Absolutely.
And, we all have that in different forms. It could be, often for men, it's to do with, how successful you are in terms of your business or the finances or things like that, or maybe like six pack or those kind of things. And, we all have it for different reasons. And so, my journey in my own personal life was about reconnecting to that unconditional self-love rather than loving myself based on all these conditions.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's so important, right? Because the minute you do that deep inner work and you love yourself so much, like you said, to the point where you're not looking to extract something out of a relationship to fill your own wounds or voids, essentially, right?
Exactly.
And that's what the majority of people, I feel like, Monica, are doing, right? Including myself in the past. I would have this mother wound and, father wound. I'd have maybe some insecurities, and then I'd go out and seek to fill those, wounds or voids through people, through relationships, through substances, through whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah.
So, and I feel like that's not the best way to go about things.
No.
You work on yourself, you heal yourself, you fill your own cup, and then everything becomes sort of like, it's almost like you're getting into a relationship to enjoy the ride with somebody, as opposed to, you need to tell me I'm handsome or I'm pretty, for example, or I'm important or I'm special, so on and so forth.
Yes. And really, if you think about it, when you do that kind of thing, it's not, you can think of it the same as an addictive drug. If someone's a heroin addict, they stop enjoying the process of taking heroin pretty quickly because they need it. They need it for survival. It's like their nervous system is shaking until they take it.
Yes.
So that process stops being enjoyable for them. Maybe the first time it was really enjoyable for them. But the same with love. Like if you feel like, I need your attention, your validation, you to tell me that I'm enough for me to feel that I'm enough, then that process of love, it stops being this enjoyable process together, and it starts being more of a dependency in the same way that you become dependent on a drug. And then that just creates this very toxic foundation as well for the relationship. And so, and it's kind of unfair on that person as well to expect this one magical person to be able to provide you with something which you've spent the last 20, 30, 40 years trying to provide for yourself and haven't been able to. It's this impossible task that you're handing over to them, and then you expect them to be able to do it when you haven't been able to do it for yourself. So again, it's just all creates a very unhealthy foundation for the relationship. And then when it comes to dating as well, even one of the things that I say is, with dating and with a first interview for a job, if you go into that with the energy, you don't have to say this, but with the energy of, please give me the job. I'm so desperate for the job. I really need the money. Someone can sense that, and it really is quite repulsive to the interviewer. The same for a date. If you go on that date, like, please make me feel enough, because I don't feel enough myself, and I haven't dated in ages, and no one wants to give me attention and all this kind of stuff, then someone can sense that energy. Whereas if you go into that situation knowing that you're enough, that's the queen energy that I talk about. Is a queen, when she dates, she and the same with a king, he has that self-worth and she has that self-worth. So she's going into this date knowing authentically who they are, and they say, I love who I am. So, and I understand that, not everybody is going to be for everybody, but I'm not going to personalize it if you're not interested in me in that way. And my life is so full that it's not that I don't, I'm not one of those people that's like, no, us women, we don't need no man or anything like that. But it's just more like your life should be so whole and full that with or without a partner, your life is amazing.
Exactly.
And so then that person can just add to your already abundant life rather than needing to fill any voids there.
That's exactly it. Yeah, just enjoy the ride together.
Yeah.
It's not two people trying to extract certain things from each other.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, and going back to a point you just mentioned now is, I find, Monica, like nowadays, a lot of people, are just very codependent on each other. There's a lot of enmeshment that goes on. And again, I feel like that stems from your, relationship with your parents. And then you go on and seek to replicate those dynamics with partners and relationships as well, right?
Yes.
So I feel like there's so much codependency that's going on nowadays. And like people need something or someone, otherwise they're not okay.
Yes.
Right?
Because they're not willing to face themselves. And it's, I understand, because I genuinely think it's one of the hardest things that
So
you will
difficult.
ever have to do to
sure.
truly face yourself, to go within, face those past wounds. But I promise you, the short-term pain that you're having to face right now is so worth it for the fact that you won't have to experience the long-term pain of never addressing that. For the
Absolutely.
people that just constantly go towards alcohol or other forms of escapism rather than addressing it. Okay, in the short term, it might feel like an easier option, but in the long term, it's actually, you're creating a lifetime of pain for yourself, because it will just always be niggling in the background, and it will be running the show for you. It will be picking your partners. It will be picking your lifestyle choices. It will be picking how much you know you're worth to go for a job that has always been a dream of yours, or to travel to that place you've always wanted to go to move to a new country, to go and approach that girl. It will be running the show for you without you realizing, if you don't address those past wounds. But yes, in the short term, it does take an immense amount of bravery to do that. So that's why I always just respect so much anyone that comes to like me, or anyone that comes to any kind of therapy or coaching to address that stuff, because most people aren't brave enough to do that. So
Correct.
if you are one of those people, I salute you. Well done.
No, absolutely. And also, Monica, I feel like not everybody even knows that this sort of work needs to be done. So not only are they not, some people might know about it and then they just sort of don't want to face it, and they'll resort to things like escapism. But I feel like there's so many people that don't even know that this sort of work exists or can be done.
So true.
So I feel like the education needs to be more out, although it's getting out there nowadays on social media. There's a lot of talk about healing and inner work and relationships and past wounds and all of that, but I feel like there's still a lot of education that needs to be
100%
put out there, essentially.
And even from the perspective of like a relationship coach, I really want more people to do this kind of work, and because it's not just about themselves, it's also about in terms of being able to relate to somebody else. If you can't form a deeply connected relationship with yourself, if you never face your own emotions, then the type of relationships that you will be attracted to and will attract into your life will probably be quite surface level.
Absolutely.
And that is, I'm not disputing, it's probably an easier relationship. It just, there's no never any conflict and all that kind of stuff. But then in terms of the level of fulfillment, I actually do think people, even if they experience, for instance, with conflict, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think if you know how to conflict repair, it can actually really deepen an intimacy.
Correct.
But again, that involves you being able to get in touch with your own emotions and recognize if you're having conflict with someone and you feel this like heightened emotion about something, what's the deeper need beneath that?
Correct.
But again, you have to be able to ask yourself that question, because otherwise it is just two hurt inner children engaging in conflict together.
Correct.
And so in terms of having healthier, happier relationships, also if you can connect to your own emotions more, then you can connect to the other person's emotions in a healthier way as well, and have that like deeper intimacy, which is more likely to last a lifetime.
Absolutely.
The surface level connections, okay, you might even get married, you might be married for 5-10 years or whatever, but having that lifelong like soulmate connection, it's harder to do if you're not willing to connect to your own emotions.
Absolutely. I feel like, I read this one quote once, Monica, that said something like, you can only be as close to somebody else as you are close to your own self at first.
Beautiful.
Right?
I love that.
So like if you're so far away from your own self, it's literally as if you're walking around with this like wall or barrier, and you can only get that close to someone because you haven't even met yourself yet.
So true.
Yeah. So it's so important. Even if it's not within the context of a relationship, doing that inner work is just so, like you said, the short-term sort of pain or discomfort of going through it is so worth it for all the benefits that you get after.
Yes.
You're lighter, you're freer, you're more authentic.
Yes.
And I feel like, just life flows so much better once you do that work.
100%, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, big advocate for it.
Yeah, and what about, for example, if someone wants to do that work, right? So what are the healing modalities that you've tried or that you recommend? Because I know that I've done literally everything in the books.
I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I'll tell you all about it for sure.
So.
But yeah, first maybe you touch up on it, and then I'll jump in afterwards.
Sure. So the one that I love doing with my clients is inner child work, because I feel, as I've mentioned before, so much of our past wounds are essentially from those years from about like 0 to 7.
Yes.
So we those are kind of running the show for us a lot of the time. And I find with inner child work, if you can sort of picture yourself at that age, it's much easier to bring yourself back into the emotion and understand the emotion and really connect to how you are feeling at that time. I'm a big advocate as well for parts work, internal family systems, all of that kind of work. And shadow work too, I think has had huge impacts on my life and the lives of my clients as well. But I find inner child work, I just find, and it's such a beautiful modality as well to incorporate into your everyday life. Like I speak to my inner child every single morning when I have my meditation, and I just tune in with her, and I find it so uplifting as well. Shadow work, I don't think I could do shadow work every single morning. It's deep work. Yeah. Inner child work is deep work, but it also leaves you feeling very uplifted. And I think in terms of self-love as well, because you can really picture yourself. How could you not love the younger version of yourself? If you look at that young version of yourself, there's not a single one of my clients that didn't just feel so much love for themselves, because that version of them is them. And so when they're not loving themselves as the adult version of themselves, they're not loving that little 3-year-old cute version of themselves that they're looking at, So so I love doing inner child work. And especially with the feminine embodiment piece, I've been incorporating a lot more somatic therapy, even with dance and things like that.
Awesome.
And because the hips, especially for women, is where a lot of our pain and stagnant energy is. And so when we move the hips, it actually really helps to move our body. And even because for a lot of women, they feel very disconnected from their sexual energy and their sensual energy, or their sensuality. And so, being able to get into the body and connect to the body, even with breath work, meditation. Yeah, there's lots of different, I basically, with my clients, I'll look at them on a case-by-case basis and see what's going to be the most beneficial for them. So for things like self-love and self-worth, actually, I love to do inner child work. But then if there's, with sexual trauma, for instance, then we'll even do some different bodily exercises and stuff, or shadow work. It's on a case-by-case basis. But I'd love to hear about your journey.
Yeah, so like I said, I've done everything in the books, literally. So for me, it started with talk therapy, like I said initially. I think this was 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. I wasn't happy, and then I was like, okay, let me just go in. I saw a post on Instagram by a psychologist. And keep in mind, Monica, before that, I had zero idea about healing, about inner work, about trauma. I didn't even realize that I was carrying quite a bit of trauma. I didn't know. I didn't have the cognitive awareness of all of this universe, essentially, right? So for me, I got into therapy in order to just get some. I thought therapy was advice giving. That's how little I knew 5 years ago.
Consultancy.
Literally, I thought I'm going in to ask for professional advice. That's what I thought therapy was, literally. And then obviously you get in there for a certain reason. It could be a most recent event or something you're annoyed about, a relationship, your work, your job, whatever it may be. Most people get into therapy for a recent sort of event or a current life crisis or whatever.
Yes.
So you get in there for that reason, and then, obviously if you stick with the therapy, you start to open that Pandora's box, and boom, everything just comes gushing out. I
didn't sign up for this.
Literally, Monica, when I went in, I was like, wow, I was so not aware that my literally like my whole life was connected since birth up until now. All the decisions I made, all the relationships I had, everything was, like you said, it was my unhealed inner child and my traumas subconsciously running the show or running the circus, like I call it. You know, for me, it was a circus.
That.
I was just bashing around life, totally unaware of my own patterns and not knowing where it stemmed from. And then that's when I learned all about family dynamics, and I learned about the relationship, you know, with your caretakers can have a profound impact on your entire life. And I was totally not aware of any of this 5 years ago. So that's why I think it's so important to put that education out there, because once you know it, it's like, oh, okay, now I'll be able to take the action because I actually know that this sort of healing universe exists. Especially for men, I feel, Monica.
I was going to say.
It's not very, you know, we're taught to be like very macho and hide your emotions and like don't show emotions. That's very feminine. But no, we're all human beings and we all have emotions. And if you don't process them, then you stay stuck, essentially. You stay sort of like miserable, pretty much.
And as I said, honestly, I think it's the strongest thing that anyone can do is to, I don't care how many weights you can lift in the gym.
Absolutely.
If you can't face your inner demons, if you can't face your past wounds, you're not that, okay. And anyone eventually can lift a weight, but it really takes a huge amount of strength to face that internal stuff. But I just really wanted to like praise you actually for that, because I think it is so important for there to be more men speaking about this kind of thing, because I do think there's been a lot of social conditioning, you know, for women that, oh, it's okay for women to cry. We can't get angry though.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's something with women that,
women
you know,
have a lot of suppressed like anger and rage because they're taught to be the good girl and not, you know, speak up.
But crying is fine. So that's why therapy and stuff, I'm sure there's a lot more women that have willingly gone to therapy, whereas for men it might have been their wives or something forcing them into it at first. But we are seeing much more. So that's why whenever I see men, especially, you know, like you're very like physically strong and all that kind of stuff. Like I love seeing men like that being advocates for this kind of stuff, because it doesn't make you less masculine or anything.
Like you said, it's way harder to do that, actually. I've lifted the heaviest weights possible and it doesn't compare to anything that I've done recently over the past 5 years. And funnily enough, Monica, I find like when you do that inner work, you don't even find the need to even lift as heavy in terms of weights because you were sort of compensating before, and now you don't need to compensate anymore.
So true.
It's so true. I see it in myself. You know, I'm a lot. You know, I'm not as physically big and muscular as I once was before. But again, I was doing that in order to compensate for the wounds that I had that, again, was totally subconscious.
Wow, that's really powerful that you recognize that, because most people don't. And that's why I always say with anything that you do in life, whether it's, you know, you can still go for huge goals and everything like that, but where are you doing it from? Are you doing it from a place of, I don't love myself unless I earn $1 million, or unless I get that guy, or unless I have the, you know, this weight on the scale? Where are you doing it from? And so if you love yourself throughout for instance, with bodily stuff, I've had my own journey with, you know, eating disorders and all that kind of stuff. And a big part of that was I used to do acting. And so I was so obsessed with my weight and how I looked and all of these kind of things. But I was doing it from such a place of self-hate. So I would go on these extreme yo-yo diets. I remember I did one. It was like a Beyonce one that all you do is you drink this, I think it's called the lemonade diet. And she did it before one of her films where she lost an obscene amount of weight. And well, apparently this is what the media said. And it was lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and water, I think. And that's all you drink. You don't eat anything. So of course I lost so much weight, but I hated myself in the process. But then when I got to that right weight, then I was like, okay, this is good. Like I'm enough now. But what was interesting for me then, when I later on in life, I worked online and I was traveling, and I just remember having this moment of just extreme gratitude to my body of, look at all these incredible things that I've been able to do thanks to this incredible body that I've been gifted with in this lifetime. And, you know, I climbed up volcanoes. I did like 3-4 day hikes in Patagonia. You know, I did these incredible things. And so I realized how unfair it was on my body, that I was only going to love it if it was like, you know, this big or whatever. And I was a bit bigger then. But what was interesting then, through loving my body, I gradually just got to the weight that I wanted to be. And then sometimes like, you know,
and
when I
probably
was
in a healthier way as well.
Exactly.
Right?
And yeah, so and then in terms of going for goals like work things or whatever it might be in the gym, like needing to lift X amount of weight, do it from a place of like, wow, I'm so blessed that I've been gifted with this body.
Absolutely.
Let's just see like how far it can go rather than feeling like I'm not enough until I do that.
Absolutely, exactly. And for me, for example, I was using it almost like armor. I wanted to get big and strong, sort of to, you know, hide those internal wounds. Yeah, so
that's
I
really
felt
beautiful.
like a physical armor was necessary in order to prevent people from getting so deep within myself, essentially.
That's so powerful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then when you do that inner work, you start to realize that you don't need to protect those wounds anymore because they're essentially like thorns. And you know, so as soon as somebody touches them, you sort of react. But the minute you start plucking out all the thorns, it's like, oh, hey, I don't need to protect this anymore because I've healed the wounds.
Exactly.
As opposed to putting a protective mechanism around it.
And that's why, like with inner child work, for instance, when people are exploding out to other people, thinking that they're defending their inner child, that's not actually defending your inner child. Because what a true empowered parent to your inner child would do is they would acknowledge the child and sort of hold the child and be like, I understand why you're feeling this way. And I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And I understand. Hold space for them, accept how they're feeling. And at the same time, they wouldn't then go explode out to the other person. Correct. They would truly try to get that child's needs met. And so how do you do that? Not through shouting at the other person, but saying, this is what that child needs. If you're able to do this, great. If you're not, then these will be the repercussions from it. And that's how you set a healthy boundary rather than saying, you need to do this and you're this horrible person. Yeah. How can you actually get that child's needs met?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's so important because oftentimes you, like you said, like if you just blame the other person and you project everything on them, you're not actually, you know, turning inward to see where you contributed to the situation as well.
Yeah, exactly. And also seeing what your deeper need is.
Exactly.
You know, that's something, for instance, with like anger or jealousy or these kind of things that might show up in relationships. Sometimes you need to really just take a moment to be with yourself and ask yourself again, it can be through inner child work or just kind of tuning into your body through stillness, and just see what's the deeper need below that emotion. Because for instance, with jealousy, sometimes it can seem like that's all that's going on is I just feel jealous.
Yes.
But really in reality, below that is like, am I giving myself enough love and attention? Or is, you know, maybe there is a boundary that's been crossed here. So am I honoring myself in this way? The fact that I'm allowing this person to behave in this kind of way and I still stick around. You know, there's so many different things that you can look at beneath the surface and then actually get your needs met.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, coming back to the sort of healing modalities that we were talking about. Yeah, so like I said, for me, it started with talk therapy. That's when that put my foot into the door, into this whole sort of universe. And then I realized, oh, wow, there's a lot of sort of like layers I need to like tap into, right? So for me, I started at the cognitive level. Then I went a little bit deeper into the emotional level, somatic level, and then even on a spiritual level as well, right? So beautiful. I went through those sort of like 4 layers of like deep inner work. And like we were talking about earlier, it's so temporarily difficult, but the rewards are infinitely worth it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so for me, things like talk therapy was fantastic. Then I started meditation. There's this meditation called transcendental meditation or TM.
Yeah.
Very simple, yet very powerful.
Yeah.
And then for me, I realized that I needed to get back into my body. So I started to do things like yoga, which I had never done before. I was all about lifting the heavy weights and pounding the iron and whatever. So when I started yoga, that was very healing for me, actually. A lot of emotions would come out during yoga sessions. Yeah, like you said, especially with the hips as well. Putting myself in certain postures, it would actually also remind me of me being my inner child again, right? So you go into the happy baby and whatever. So healing, Monica.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was so powerful for me. So highly recommend yoga as well, meditation.
Yes.
What else did I do? Oh, so then I did some breath work as well. So when I was in Bali, like we were talking about before the session, I did this modality called holotropic breathwork.
Yes.
I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yes.
Monica, it was so profoundly
Deep work,
powerful.
Yeah.
It was extremely cathartic. So there was so much emotional release in that one session. I highly recommend it for people that are looking to sort of like, just like expel a ton of emotion in one sort of sitting.
Yeah, you can't do that every day.
You can't do that every day. Definitely you can't.
But yeah, it's amazing work.
It was.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was shocked at how powerful the modality was. And an explosion of emotion was coming out for me. So much grief, so much. Yeah, for me, there was a lot of grief in there. And this was an emotion that I had never even known about or faced or even knew that was stored in there. I had so much grief, Monica, in there. And that was actually manifesting as anxiety for me. And then I realized symptoms, whether physical or mental, are essentially your body giving you signals that, hey, there's something that needs to be addressed, right? So for me, I was getting anxious, and then I would never know why I was anxious. I just wanted it to stop.
Yeah.
And so I'd reach for, a drink or a cigarette or a vape or, doom scrolling on my phone or just keeping myself busy and active, not knowing that anxiety was essentially my body saying, hey, Roy, there's something that you need to address.
Yes.
So our bodies are very wise.
So
we just need to know what they're trying to tell us, right?
Yes.
I use this analogy, Monica. It's like when you're driving a car and the engine light comes on, signifying that there's an issue with the engine, right? Most people want to just remove the battery so that engine light goes off. And it's like, oh, no more engine light. We're good now, right? Whereas you haven't actually fixed the root cause of the issue, which is the actual engine. And I feel like also nowadays, when it comes to like, for example, anti-anxiety medication. A lot of people would be so quick to reach for something like that because they can't take the anxiety. But again, that may temporarily make you feel good because you're not anxious anymore, but you've only now numbed or masked the sort of issue, right?
Yes.
You've removed the battery and the engine light is off, but you haven't addressed the actual engine, right? Or the deeper root cause.
Yes.
And I feel like also now Western medicine is heavily reliant on symptomatic resolution as opposed to addressing the root cause.
Well, also, I mean, they can't keep making money if they actually
That's
get
exactly
cured.
it, right? That's exactly it, right? They sell you a quick solution, a quick pill. Oh, you're anxious, anti-anxiety. You're depressed, antidepressants. You have a headache, Tylenol, whatever the case may be, because we're so used to, in this fast-paced age, to numb and get instant gratification and solutions, as opposed to actually looking and saying, hey, wait, why am I anxious? Why do I have a headache? So on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then going in there and actually addressing the root cause.
Exactly.
Yeah,
if you have a headache, it could be that you just need to drink more water, but then you start taking these tablets. Yeah, and then you start taking these tablets that then actually make you more sick. And so you really have to be so careful with all of that stuff. But as you said, most people would rather hear quick fix as opposed to something which takes a little bit more effort but is more long-term beneficial for you.
And is long-lasting because you actually feel the root cause.
Exactly.
So now that engine light won't come on anymore because you fixed the engine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And actually something which I wanted to address because I didn't mention it earlier, but I've actually done some hypnotherapy before.
Yeah, me
and
too.
that is something which I actually do really advocate for is because the one that I did was RTT, Rapid Transformational Therapy, and that is really, really impactful, and that does
Awesome.
Yeah, but those are like deep. Those are what I've done a 5-hour session.
Oh wow, wow.
Yeah, they're typically around 3 hours.
Okay.
But one of the sessions that I had was incredibly deep, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
But imagine 5 hours of like you're in hypnotherapy state and it's deep.
No, I've tried a therapy called regression therapy. It's part of hypnotherapy.
Yeah, similar vibes.
It was also very powerful.
Yeah.
What else have I done? So going back to the breathwork, holotropic breathwork, so powerful. I did something else called conscious connected breathwork.
Yes,
also extremely powerful for me. Lots of emotions came flooding out. It wasn't as explosive or cathartic as holotropic breathwork, but I had a very nice, soothing, emotional release. So powerful that session.
Yeah.
I also did a Reiki session. I don't know if you know,
I
like
love
spiritual
Reiki,
work.
yeah.
And for me, Monica, that session, I mean, I wish I had a video recording of what was going on in that session. It was wild. It was absolutely wild. I was very skeptical of Reiki. I was like, all this spiritual woo stuff. But I'm like, let me give it a shot because I had gotten into spirituality at that point. I understood, like, I learned all about the
What's
chakras.
the worst that can happen? You know?
Exactly. I'm like, either it doesn't work or I'm going
Yeah.
to benefit, but nothing bad is going to happen, right? And like I said, I started to get into spirituality and I learned all about the chakras and how they're related to, you know, certain trauma and so on and so forth. Monica, I went into that Reiki session. Like I said, if we had a video recording of it, I wish I had a video recording of it. It was wild. So as soon as the practitioner started, explosive, like, tears started coming out. It was insane. I felt my eyes were closed the entire time. I knew exactly where his hands were. I knew exactly what he was doing. And then there was so much energy exchange between us that his hand was getting so hot, it was burning his hand. He had to remove his hand on a couple of times and literally go like, and remove it because there was so much energy going on in that room. And I was crying, Monica. I know this sounds a little bit woo, but I felt like I was crying for my entire lineage during that session.
Wow.
It was like an ancestral cry that was going on. It was all just coming out. And I was like, this can't be from this lifetime alone. I just felt all my family's lineage, demons, everything coming out through me. And I was open-mouthed, crying without any sound. It was just coming out, and this session was wild. He had to stop a few times because his hand was getting so burnt in the session. It was wild.
Yeah.
And I went home, I had felt just emotionally
you must
drained.
have felt like
I'm like, wow, you know, I'm the cycle breaker. I did it for my family, you know.
You must have felt like 10 stone lighter as well.
Oh my God. I literally felt I did like I said, ancestral work.
You probably slept for like 2 days.
Oh my God. And I got visions during the sessions, like my grandmother, and like I just felt it was a very spiritual, powerful session. And I feel like that had quite a bit of long-lasting sort of change. I felt so much lighter ever since that one session.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I feel like I cleared out some energetic blockages for sure.
Yeah. I think when you experience one time something like that, you're like, okay, I understand.
And for me, it was like one and done. I felt like I did what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And now, Monica, so at some point, I also got very caught in the whole healing phase.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm wounded. I need to heal. And I just kept staying stuck in that sort of victim healing sort of bubble for some time.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, people heal to actually live a good, fun, joyful life, right? And then after that, I sort of finally decided that, you know, I think I've done enough sort of like inner work over the past 4 or 5 years. And since then, life has been beautiful, Monica. Yeah, I feel like I've graduated from the whole healing phase that I was in.
That's beautiful.
No one will ever be 100% fully healed, but it's like, okay, you're good enough to actually go out, enjoy your life, be happy, travel the world, live authentically, express yourself. Decide to, you know, share the gift that, you know, you have with the world. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
And I love that you said as well, like sharing yourself authentically, because I think that's such a key part of healing. And then, you know, when we were addressing about the ripple effect that then has on all areas of your life, because if you can love and accept all parts of yourself and then in turn live your life from that authentic place, then the partnerships that you attract into your life, the opportunities, everything, your whole life just feels so much more in alignment with who you truly are, not other people's narratives of who you should be, not societal narratives of who you should be, but who you truly are. And it's just such a more beautiful way to live.
100%. You reconnect with your soul on a very deep level. And you realize, okay, I'm here for a certain purpose in this lifetime, and I'm going to make sure that I live out this purpose, regardless of what anybody thinks, regardless of any societal conditioning, past conditioning, family conditioning. I'm just going to be me, essentially, right?
Beautiful.
And it's so freeing to do that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, for sure.
That's freedom.
Yeah, no, it is. It really is. I think that's all about it for today. Is there anything else that you wanted to sort of like touch on or talk about?
No, I think we went deep. It was great.
We did.
I can't do surface level conversations.
No, me too. And it's funny because once you do the healing work, you're not really able to do the small talk as much anymore, right? That's so funny. Well, thank you so much, Monica, for agreeing to come on. Thanks for sharing all the insights that you did. I'm sure this episode can, hopefully benefit people that are looking for sort of help. So yeah, I guess that's a wrap.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.